My name's Elizabeth Sidiropoulos. I'm the Chief Executive at the South African Institute of International Affairs, and it's a really great pleasure and honor to be here at the Doha Forum. I have to confess it's my first time here, but it's also great to be moderating a panel, which I will introduce in a couple of seconds, on a topic that I think occupies a lot of African and global South countries' considerations these days about development and the future of climate action. In the context also of a number of emerging groupings or groupings that are growing in importance, and today that discussion will be focusing on the BRICS. It's probably true to say, I'm going to make a couple of sort of opening remarks, which my panel can then also pick up. In the context of climate and development, because I think we need to see the two together, I'm going to make a statement that says that the era of development aid is dead, or is very close to dead. We have heard over the last couple of days statements from the US and others about the importance of ramping up to 5% defense spending in many countries in the global north, and that apparently is the standard now. So that, in the context also of a constrained fiscal space, I think makes issues of development finance and development aid even more challenging. It's also true to say, I think, that the age of consensus around key global challenges that require our collective action is also sort of fraying. We've just come out, as South Africa, we've just come out of the G20. We also saw some of the challenges in COP30. And so the ability to mobilize around issues that we thought maybe a few years we all agreed on, like climate change, I think is under threat. And there is a global leadership gap on a number of levels, but in the context of this panel, of course, around climate action. So, who is stepping into the breach in terms of climate, in terms of development? And I think, let me stop there and welcome Her Excellency, who will be joining the panel as well. And then I'll move to the introductions. Welcome, Minister. So the question is, who's going to step into the breach? What does this mean for vulnerable economies in Africa and Asia? And are expanding formations such as the BRICS providing a new normative framing for climate and development? And so to have this conversation with me, I'm really, really pleased and honored to be sharing the stage with Her Excellency Sara Nyanti, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liberia. Welcome. The Deputy Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan, Mr. Fariz Rzayev. And, of course, the President of the China Energy Research Institute, Victor Gao. So let me start with you, Minister. This year, Liberia announced that the discovery of key critical mineral deposits. This, of course, is a very important dimension and topic in Africa at the moment. We saw it also feature very strongly in the conversations in the G20, the development of a critical minerals framework that is intended to sort of create industrialization prospects. And in one sense, the energy transition, I think, clearly presents an opportunity for Africa through the demand generated for critical minerals. But it's the issue about exporting them in an unprocessed state. How is Liberia navigating this moment of increased demand and popularity of critical minerals? And what opportunities do you see in the context of BRICS for enhanced partnerships? Of course, Liberia isn't a member of the BRICS. We have 3 African countries now, Egypt, Ethiopia, and of course, South Africa. certainly for South Africa and its engagement as part of the BRICS over many years, it's seen Africa as an important actor that the BRICS needed to engage in. How do you see that in this broader changing energy and geopolitical context around critical minerals?
Firstly, thank you for having me. And it's really great to be sharing the stage with the learned colleagues here with me today. For Liberia, the issue of critical minerals is something that's very important to us. And it's something that our President Joseph Numa Boyka, has been engaging on. We've engaged with different, I would say, powers in relation to our critical minerals. And we've expressed openness for partnership on our critical minerals, but very clearly in line with our economic diplomacy, looking at value addition in Liberia. And any engagement would have to be from the perspective of mutual beneficial approaches, job creation for young people, and making sure that we move away from exporting our raw materials. We have a history of exporting our rubber, our iron ore, and now the demand is for there to be value addition at home. And because when you're exporting your raw materials, you're exporting your jobs. And the jobs are required for our young people. Looking at our demographics, over 65% of our population under 35, and making sure that we create the opportunities for them at home. I think one of the important things to state about Liberia, beyond the issue of critical minerals, very broadly in relation to our natural resources, is the fact that we have about 50%, almost 50% of the remaining intact tracts of the Upper Guinea forest. So we have the largest proportion. We have about 578 kilometers of coastline. We have 96,000 square kilometers of ocean. And one of the things that we've observed over time, Liberia being a post-conflict country, having come out of decades of crisis and so forth, the link between, the nexus between climate, natural resources, and conflict, it needs to be discussed, and at the level of the Security Council, and it's one of the priorities we have at the Security Council. Beyond financing, and the discussion about the parallels now with the multipolar world that we have, we see ourselves in terms of multipolarity. Africa must be a pole, that's one part of it, and financing, alternative financing, another part of it, but us having the right to determine how our natural resources will be used for development and not having our natural resources serve as a source of conflict. And we believe as Liberia, our president is very strong about that our experiences should serve as a lesson for other countries and making sure that the mistakes we've made in the past of giving so much away without looking at the impact or the negative impact on our development trajectory, that has to change.
Given the heightened geopolitical competition around critical minerals, how is Liberia seeing itself play in that space, navigating some of the potential risks that might be associated with this increased competition? And I think not just critical minerals, but I think also, I mean, you raise a very important point about ecosystems and the importance of Liberia in that context.
So one of the things President Boyka always says that I really like is the fact that our natural resources should work for us and not for others. And that's an important point to keep at the center of our discussions. Look, give for example our rainforest. We have the largest carbon sink in that area. And you're being told by some powers that you must preserve it because it's important for getting to net zero. But for who? We're not the polluters. We have low emissions. So if we need to be able to have some of our natural resource, which is the carbon sink, translated into resources for development, that should be a sovereign decision. It shouldn't be a demand from any power. And so navigating that for us has led President Boyka to establish a carbon market authority. We now have a new carbon market authority. We also now have a blue economy strategy. And for us, it's about us organizing ourselves around our resources and deciding and being very clear about how we want to leverage them for development. But I can say it's a difficult space. It's a difficult space because everybody wants what you have and not necessarily on the terms that you dictate. And that's where the power imbalance needs to be balanced.
So it's about leverage, and I think we can maybe come back to that just now. But let me move on to the Deputy Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is in a really interesting, dare I say, geopolitical region. You're also not a BRICS country, but you have to your north, you have that old friend Russia to the south. You have Iran. You're an important energy producer. I think you've also been, you have an interesting multi-vector policy or a multi-alignment policy. You've developed some really strong energy relations with the EU. With the US, you've also, the corridor, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, right? Have I got the name right? But I think also interestingly, a very important partnership with China, which is like South Africa's now a comprehensive strategic partnership. You've chaired the non-aligned movement, so I'm assuming you regard yourself as a global South country, or am I? How does Azerbaijan see the BRICS and the more challenging geopolitical context, especially when we talk about energy geopolitics? Because I think Azerbaijan is a key player in that realm.
Thank you, madam. It's a pleasure and privilege to be in such a great company today at the Doha Forum, and thank you for having me. Few things to know and understand about Azerbaijan, which help then understand and realize better the background of our foreign security and energy policy. Azerbaijan is a small, landlocked, post-Soviet country located in a volatile, fragile neighborhood. Many implications, geopolitical, geoeconomic, and so on and so forth. So from day one of our independence, we've been a strong believer in multilateralism, international institutions, and international law, because we believe that this is the best alternative to chaos and turbulence which we are observing today in so many parts of the world, including very near Azerbaijan's borders. We managed to solve the conflict, which has been plugging and burdening Azerbaijan and the region in general, with the help of our friends and partners, led by the new US administration and President Trump in person. Thank you for mentioning a few things about Azerbaijan's achievements in the past. Indeed, we've been chairing and presiding over the non-alignment movement for 4 years. That was unprecedented in NAM's recent history. We introduced a number of revolutionary initiatives and improvements in NAM, and we try to put forward NAM mostly as active non-alignment, in accordance with that concept. Azerbaijan is not exactly global South country, but we consider ourselves mostly to be a part of the global majority. Since we are indeed, like it or not, we are the majority, right? The great powers, as great as they are a minority, right? So we need to remind ourselves of this fact, time and again. When it comes to climate change, I would particularly like to emphasize Azerbaijan's role as a bridge builder. More or less a year ago, November 2024, Azerbaijan hosted COP29 summit, a crucial international event designed and supposed to put forward new initiatives and give a new impetus, create a new momentum to the global fight against climate change. And in our humble belief, we believe that we managed to do that. We created what is now commonly known as the Baku Breakthrough. We managed to steer the discussions and to achieve, as hard as it was, a consensus on at least 3 key points. We managed to triple the pledge of financial assistance designed for small island and developing states, right? So from 100 billion to more than 300 billion. We managed to finalize the negotiations around the famous Article 6, the carbon market. And we managed to operationalize, finally, after a long period of discussion, the so-called loss and damage fund, right? Regretfully, this was all done in spite of quite a huge and active opposition by a group of countries, whom I'm not going to name today, but you can easily guess them, who first tried to block the very idea of Azerbaijan hosting the COP summit. Then, when they failed, because dozens and dozens of leaders, heads of state, heads of government attended and contributed to Baku breakthrough, they tried to block and oppose the discussions aimed at reaching consensus and reaching result-oriented practical solutions, and they failed again thanks to general support of our friends and partners, including mostly from the global majority and global south countries. Azerbaijan put forward a number of initiatives aimed at making COP process more efficient and more result-oriented. As small as it sounds, for the first time in history, we suggested to establish the COP Troika. Because when we assumed, or we were beginning to assume the chairmanship, we realized with a great deal of surprise that there is no institutional continuity between the COP presidencies. And each and every new COP presidency was just left with a pile of open files, unfulfilled pledges, controversial issues, and so on and so forth. So we instituted the COP Troika together with previous and the current and the future chairmanships, and we did a great deal of work to help prepare the recently held COP30 summit in Belém, Brazil, as good as we could. And Azerbaijan was an important part and element of that process, and we continue to play that role as still a member of the Troika, now as a past presidency. We will continue to do that, to continue playing our role as a bridge builder, which we are. Thank you.
I want to come back to the point about the COPs, because we've now had two countries from Global South, Global Majority, chairing the COPs over the last 2 years. Do you think that we've been able to shift, as Global South, we've been able to shift the climate and development narrative through leadership in the COPs? Have we been able to sort of start rethinking, reshaping the development climate nexus, which I think is so critical, because sometimes, there are people who see climate as climate, and we've got to we've got to deal with climate, whatever the consequences, at the expense of development, and then there are others that go the other way, and I think it's about recognizing that nexus. Have we been able to start shaping that debate?
Thank you, Madam. As on many other international agenda issues, probably there will never be a consensus on this, and we have to accept that and live with that. But what is important, again, in our humble belief, is to try identify the issues where we can at least make an attempt to bring the parties together. And another important thing is to try to avoid unnecessary politicization of issues. Again, politicization is probably inevitable, but the unnecessary and artificial politicization, manipulating of issues in this or that particular agenda sake, and so on. To avoid, for example, blaming everything on the oil and gas producing countries, because we didn't cause the climate change. What about, again, a group of countries which very successfully industrialized for the past centuries with no regard to whatever standards or limitations, right? We are basically dealing with that kind of heritage, but we are not blaming anybody. What we need to focus on is to work on result-oriented, down-to-earth solutions, mostly having in mind the vulnerable groups, the small island developing states, the mountainous communities who are losing sources of income, whose nature, landscapes are actually shifting under their feet and in front of their eyes. And Azerbaijan is no exception here. Just two facts. In past 20 years, the level of the Caspian Sea went down 2 meters. 1.5 meters in just past 5 years. Again, in past 20 years, according to space satellite imagery, Azerbaijan's volume of Azerbaijan glaciers, the natural sources of fresh water, again, decreased 20%. We are witnessing some very serious and very negative processes, no matter how you label them. So we need to think about solutions. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let me move to you, Victor. Sort of the one BRICS country, well, two BRICS countries, you and me, on the panel. I think it's really been interesting to see how BRICS, particularly this year, but it's been building up over some time, has really accelerated the cooperation on climate and energy. This year we had some really interesting outcome documents from Brazil, principles for fair, inclusive and transparent carbon accounting in product and facility footprints, report on intellectual property rights, which I think is really, really important, linked to options to enhance climate change technology cooperation. There's establishment of a lab for trade, climate change and sustainable development, and it was interesting to see trade now come into the COP30 discussions and outcomes. And I think in 2024, during the Russian presidency, BRICS established a carbon markets partnership. So there's a lot happening. Of course, with the expansion of the BRICS, we now have a big group of countries that are actually energy producers, mostly fossil fuel producers, and also large energy consumers. But what I want to come to you on is, of course, looking specifically at China, it's a renewable energy superpower, but it's also ramping up its new coal power capacity. Far be it from a South African to comment on coal, but nevertheless. The rest of the world, and particularly in Africa, and we saw that as part of South Africa's G20 presidency, I think the Global South is really looking to grow green jobs, to look at green industrialization. A lot of this is at the moment concentrated in China, if you're thinking of e-vehicles, batteries, and so on and so forth. How does China see its role in relation to the BRICS and the Global South in that regard, in terms of helping Africa to green industrialize? The development paradigms of the 20th century no longer hold. So, where is China on this?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's my great honor to be back in Doha for the Doha Forum. And I'm very much privileged to share the stage with the two excellencies. And it's such a great honor to meet all of you. Allow me to, first of all, to express my personal condemnation of the Israeli attack on Qatar. I consider that as an act of war, as an act of aggression, and there is no justification, no excuse for such act of aggression against the state of Qatar. And I also want to express my personal appreciation to President Trump for his personal intervention against this act of war committed by Israel against Qatar. And I hope Israel will never launch another attack on Qatar, because otherwise you destroy peace and security in this part of the world. Now, secondly, thank you. I really mean it. I'm completely on the side of the Qataris, and I appreciate the Prime Minister of Qatar when he used very moderate terms. He didn't go outright in condemning such act of aggression as I did just now, but I think I speak the truth. I'm on the right side of history. No country should be allowed to unilaterally attack another country. And for Qatar to play such an important role in mediation makes the whole attack even more heinous, I think. Now, coming back to your question, allow me to mention several things. BRICS is a reality now, and BRICS is taking on more and more substance in addition to whatever it accumulated for more than 2 decades. And I think BRICS eventually will be a very powerful platform, expressing voices of all the BRICS member states as well as the partner nations. And now we have 11 full members, 10 partners. And I understand there are about 2,000 countries applying to join BRICS. So in the coming few years, you will see BRICS to gain more and more strength. That's number one. Number two is that I express huge interest in the fact that within the BRICS memberships, as well as the partners, there are so many important energy producing countries, as well as energy importing countries. So my personal hope is that eventually within the BRICS framework, there will be collaborations between the energy producing countries, exporting countries, as well as the importing and using countries. And that will be a very solid stabilizing force for the real vitality of the BRICS. Now, the second thing is that BRICS is run completely on a consensus basis. Any member, without agreeing to it, can veto any of the proposals. That explains why sometimes the decision-making process within BRICS may be slow and may not be living up to the expectation of many countries. But exactly that is also the strength of BRICS. So I think going forward, you will see BRICS playing a more important role. The second area of great interest to me is that there are members within the BRICS which keep talking about, introducing a BRICS currency, for example, or BRICS settlement system. China is not very eager to push this because my personal view is that I have no problem with the dollar or with the SWIFT system. The problem I have is that some country wants to weaponize the dollar or weaponize the SWIFT system. If they keep doing that, they will push BRICS to eventually come up with a BRICS currency or BRICS settlement system. Now, the other area, Elizabeth, I'm personally very much interested is in this AI transformation. I think AI is with us, and I coined the term called AI divide. Don't be caught up on the wrong side of the AI divide. And I think the American way of building up AI seems to pretend that AI is American intelligence. Let me tell you, no, AI is not American intelligence, and no country should be allowed to build up AI dominance, because if any country achieves AI dominance, it will be a huge violation of the sovereignty of so many other countries, especially if you are on the wrong side of the AI. And further, I believe AI should be open sourced rather than closed sourced. Now, in this connection, Elizabeth, you actually asked the right question. China's power generation is about 3 times as big as the United States. But China is on the pathway to double its power generation. Part of the reason is that China is expecting that in the real AI age, demand for power will be tremendous. So every country, if you want to play a role in AI, you need to be fully prepared to increase as much as you can your power generation. But purely relying on fossil fuel will be a disaster for climate change, for the protection of the environment. So let me tell you, while China is the biggest producer of power now, and the leading country in terms of solar, wind, and all other renewable sources of energy, China now is putting bets on 2 things. One is what we call the molten salt-based thorium reactor, which can generate huge amount of power, but without any possibility of explosion. So that takes away all the risks of nuclear reaction and making the thorium-based reactor very safe. China is already producing power on an experimental basis in the western part of China. And eventually, if China really feels very comfortable, I hope more and more countries will cooperate with China on the thorium-based reactor going forward. Now, the other thing is that China now is leading the world in the fusion reaction. Now, China is way ahead of the United States or Germany, which try to do the similar things. And if China really achieves the real breakthrough in a matter of the coming 3 to 5 years, then I hope the demand for energy for the future generations of mankind can be very much be well managed. And that will be probably the biggest contribution China can make for the sustainable development of the world. So China wants to double its capacity of power generation by using more and more technological breakthroughs. And once these breakthroughs are fully substantiated, it will be benefits for mankind as a whole. So I think China is doing the right thing. China wants to develop AI in an open source manner so that all countries can benefit and we can all cooperate together. And I'm personally very much skeptical of the American way of building AI, because they want to suck in as much money from everywhere in the world, including in this part of the world, and they want to build up AI to achieve American AI dominance, which will be a huge threat to all the 200 countries or so in the world of today, and how to protect sovereignty in the world of today, how to make sure that no country will attack you, and how to make sure that no one will push you to the wrong side of the AI divide will be the critical thing that all the countries in the world and mankind as a whole need to think about. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Victor. I want to pick up again on the green industrialization, and maybe I'll ask you the question, Minister. I think Victor has highlighted quite clearly the possibilities, and I like the American intelligence, but the possibilities, how much more energy, rather, we will be requiring across the world in order to power artificial intelligence. One of the biggest challenges that the African continent faces, of course, is that it's not about clean energy. Well, it's part of the discussion, but it's about getting energy access, creating access for nearly 600 million Africans that do not have energy. If you were having a discussion with BRICS members about forging a partnership with them, what would you be saying to them?
One of the important things we've done in terms of our foreign policy thrust has been economic diplomacy. And economic diplomacy for us has been about how we as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you have two Ministries of Foreign Affairs here, who Ministries of Foreign Affairs being responsible for this conversation around how we engage between states. And for us, it's about how we partner in a way where we take diplomacy to another level, where diplomacy is not just about the past of public diplomacy and political discourse and so forth, but really about how we transform our countries. And energy is critical. You cannot have prosperity, shared prosperity, and all the ideals that we all ascribe to in terms of sustainable development goals. Energy is at the heart of it. You cannot have jobs created through the private sector if investors do not have the energy they need to power the various industries they want. And I think at the end of the day, when you're talking about China and the green revolution in China and the energy revolution in China, and we're talking about value addition at home and critical minerals and the use of critical minerals in Africa and so forth, that's where the partnership comes in. Don't come to Africa with the intent to take, but come to Africa with the intent to partner and to spread. Energy solutions can be made at home. We have the critical minerals that are required. And how do we make sure that what's been learned in China and other BRICS countries in relation to green solutions are actually then used at home in Africa to then formulate new solutions that are green, so that would not increase the burden, the climate burden for Africa, but will also have us as creating jobs and reducing the pressures on us. So homegrown solutions that we take from countries like the BRICS countries like China, and we use those solutions at home to create jobs, but use those solutions at home to actually then be part of the solution. And I think when you see us as victims, when you see African countries as victims, it's a negative start already, because we're not victims. We've been victimized by certain actions that have been taken, but we're not victims. We hold the key to the future. And understand that we hold the key with our minerals, with our natural resources, but also with our experiences and our intelligence and our capabilities. If you see us as partners, coming to the table with us as partners, we can design those solutions together. And AI, can I just touch on AI for a minute? And this is where the concern some of us have is around how AI can be used to further try to victimize Africa because of us not being at the same level in terms of technology. And if people are really interested, if powers are really interested in us having a just world, a just and peaceful world, we'll come to the table from the perspective of the fact that you have a huge youth bulge huge creativity in Africa. And this is where, in terms of the solutions around AI and how we use AI constructively, can be engaged. We can reduce. This morning we heard about an attempted coup in Benin, and it's been resolved. But at the end of the day, this cannot be the future of Africa. But conflicts come about because of an imbalance in terms of natural resources and in terms of how those natural resources are used to transform lives. And so energy is one of them. Energy is critical, but we can partner in a way where we build on the demographic dividend and use that to really strengthen Africa's position. Getting power across Africa. And I don't want to come across as if I'm here to just praise my president, but I'm so proud to be part of a leadership where within just 2 years, we've seen a huge spread of access to energy. But in order for us to have every household in Liberia, for example, with energy, it's not just about having it, it's about the cost of energy.
Yeah.
The cost of energy. And how do we have energy solutions that are affordable for the poorest of the poor? Because it's not about just the solution itself, but the solution being practical for those who have the most need. And those with the most need are not the ones that have the voice and agency to be able to negotiate. So I think the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the various countries in the global majority, and I like that, thank you for that. The role for the global majority is how this conference, this Doha Forum this year, the first 2 words are diplomacy and dialogue. How do we make sure diplomacy and dialogue take us to the end result, which is about having a more just and peaceful world, and making sure our resources are not used to further victimize, but are used to actually build constructively.
And I think one of the big challenges that we have faced is about the economies of scale in terms of energy affordability as well on the continent. And I think there needs to be real partnership there between industry, private sector, and the state in order to be able to make it more affordable, I think. I want to ask you a very quick question, Deputy Minister, and it's going to be a provocative question, and I'm sure others want to weigh in. And that is, do you think that CBDR, that common but differential responsibilities in the climate space, is dead, given where the discussions are going in, dare I say, the global minority?
Nothing is dead. Short and honest, and maybe, again, a bit complicated answer is that nothing is dead. It all depends on in the end of the day, pooling our national efforts. And I want to echo distinguished Madam Minister's remark about national energy solutions at home, which is an indispensable and inevitable building block for any international, global, sustainable effort. And I want to stress the word sustainable here. Again, closer to our home, let's take a case of Azerbaijan. 3 points. This year we celebrated the 5th anniversary of liberation of our territories, which remained under illegal foreign military occupation for almost 30 years. As soon as we liberated them, we realized that everything is destroyed, demolished, and before we bring back people, we need to rebuild housing, infrastructure, roads, and so on. And to do that, we need energy. So the obvious solution would be, just to pump oil and gas in those territories. But my president said no. We need to be smarter than this, and we need to be vision-oriented, forward-looking. So what he did is he designated the entire liberated area to be the green energy zone. And that is, just to remind you, represents 20% of Azerbaijan's sovereign territory. So imagine every country on this planet designating at least a part of its territory, a province, a region, here and there, a green energy zone, what kind of an impact it would have globally. Second, as of today, Azerbaijan produces around 20% of our energy mix from green, alternative, renewable sources. Our intention is to double this and to bring this to 40% in less than 5 years. And we are well on the way to do that. Third point, echoing first and second one, we are not building only national capacity, but we are already cooperating with our cousins, as I like to say, across the Caspian, the great nations of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, to produce green energy, green electricity, which would be more than enough for domestic consumption and available for export in all possible directions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Let me come to you, Victor. Maybe two questions, and then let's see if we get an opportunity to ask to move to the questions from the floor. I mean, China is playing a really important role in technology development that helps to combat climate change, climate action. A lot of the BRICS statements, and now we saw it also in the G20 statement last week or 10 days ago, talk about the importance of technology neutral interventions to help deal with climate action. What are the initiatives that China specifically might be taking, also in the area of intellectual property rights, given that that is also a hot issue for global South countries, in terms of working together with African countries on helping both to increase energy access, but at the same time to do it in a smart and efficient way?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I think Her Excellency Sara mentioned the national energy policy. I'm the chairman of China Energy Security Institute. We constantly look at the interaction between energy as widely defined and security as widely defined. Allow me to mention, for any country, without your own tailor-made national energy security strategy, your economy is doomed. Really, without energy and without a strategy, you cannot really run your economy. In that sense, I'm very much concerned about Germany in Europe. I'm very much concerned about Britain, because they are really failing in lining up their energy security strategy. Now, for Africa, before I talk about Africa, let's talk about this part of the world. In addition to oil and gas, do you know which other source of energy they are enjoying the abundance in? Solar, very obviously. So my advice to all countries in this part of the world is that pool all your resources and develop solar energy as much as you can, so that you do not need to use that much of crude oil or natural gas to generate electricity. But do you know there is a huge kind of negative competition by the Americans, by the Europeans? They accuse China of producing solar equipment and solar panels. Why should we fail in cooperation between the Chinese and the Americans and the Europeans to make sure that people and the countries in the Middle East can really put their very extraordinary solar resources to the best use, so that they can really achieve sustainability of development without having to use their own resources like crude oil and natural gas? So that's one of the possibilities. Now, the other thing for Africa, allow me to mention one thing. I listened very carefully this morning to some of the remarks made. I listened very carefully. But allow me to mention one point. Before China's full engagement with Africa, Africa was more or less a forgotten continent. Part of the reason was very obvious. Many European countries and the United States had huge skeletons in their closet in dealing with the Africans. Hundreds of years of colonial rule, slavery in the United States, for example, and even for our distinguished excellency and the country she comes from, Liberia. Liberia was founded by the deported slaves from the United States after the American government realized that they no longer needed that many slaves working in the cotton fields and other fields. So they do not want to keep the African slaves as people in the United States. They deported them. They deported them to Liberia. That's the origin of Liberia. So I hope you will all understand, China does not have any skeleton in our closet in dealing with Africa. We deal with everyone in Africa as brothers and sisters. And if you ask which country built a road or highways or airports or government buildings in Africa, none of the European countries have done. Americans have never done that. It's China. I'm not fabricating this. I'm really telling you the real hard truth, that China has been fully engaged with Africa. Going forward, China wants to make sure that every of the 54 countries in Africa, for 1.4 billion if not 1.5 billion Africans. And going forward, by the end of this century, you are expecting doubling of the African population. They will all be fully engaged in the AI revolution. Using the American way of AI? No. You do not have the money. You do not have the talents to
Victor,
do that.
can I ask you to
Need to
summing
really,
up?
yeah, I will sum up. You need to really do this in an open source manner to fully engage in this AI revolution. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks, Victor. What I'm going to do, I know the time is up, it's 19 seconds and counting. I'm going to ask the Foreign Minister to have the last say in this, and then I'm afraid we'll have to end it because I have my bosses there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Very quickly, I can't leave this room without correcting something that was said about Liberia's history. So Liberia was not founded by deported slaves. Liberia was founded by 16 ethnic groups, indigenous tribes of Liberia, including, adding in addition to that, deported slaves who make up 3 to 5% of our population. Very important to debunk that, to clarify that. And Liberia today still has less than 5% of what we call settlers that came from the US, also from the Congo, and also from Barbados. Very important. Climate multipolarity, very important. Climate financing, very important. But if we don't have climate financing that aligns with the needs of Africa, and on terms that are palatable for Africa, what we're going to have is divergent lines. And I think it's very important for us to make sure that we always keep in mind the needs of those you want to finance and those you want to support. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much. Let's give them all a round of applause. I'm afraid we are being told we have to move on, but just concluding remarks. Thank you very much to all three of you. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. Suffice to say, I think the debate is shifting. I think there are new actors that are rising. BRICS is one formation that can create, I think, really useful partnerships, particularly with the continent, but there are obviously others in the broader global south, global majority. We in South Africa still call it the global south, so I'll stick with the global south. But I think it is part of the shift to multipolarity that you have mentioned, and climate action, I think, is one of those factors that is playing a geopolitical role as much as an important planetary role in the broader discussions. So thank you all very much, and thank you again to you.